He carried that uneasy mix of guilt and relief. "Anna," he began, clearing his throat, "you understand this is for the best. Martha's expecting again, and with 4 mouths to feed already." "I understand perfectly," Anna said, her voice steady as prairie grass before a storm. She understood more than he realized. A woman who couldn't bear children was worth less than a lame horse in a town where big families meant survival, and Samuel's charity had finally run dry. "Monroe's a decent man," Samuel continued, trying to sound sure. "Got himself a good spread 20 miles west, lost his wife and boy to fever years back. He needs a woman to keep house." Anna almost laughed at the bitter irony. Jack Monroe. She'd heard his name whispered in the saloon when men thought their wives weren't listening. A rancher who lived alone, a man half buried with his ghosts, who came to town twice a year for supplies and never stayed longer than needed. The perfect place to hide an embarrassment like her. "The church ladies arranged it," Martha added quickly, "through Reverend Phillips." Mr. Monroe agreed to the arrangement. Arrangement, not marriage, not partnership, just an arrangement, like she was furniture being shipped west to fill an empty corner. Down the street, Anna saw Mrs. Henderson and Mrs. Clark near the Mercantile, heads bent close in gossip. When they noticed her watching, they looked away, but not before Anna caught the satisfaction in their eyes. This was their idea of mercy. Send the barren woman to the lonely cowboy. 2 misfits canceling each other out like a cruel joke. "He doesn't know, does he?" Anna asked quietly. "About my condition?" Samuel hesitated. "Wasn't relevant to mention. Man needs a housekeeper. You need a home. Simple as that." Simple. But it wasn't. It was exile, wrapped in charity. A final washing of hands. The rattle of wheels on hard-packed dirt broke the silence. A freight wagon rolled up, driven by old Pete Sullivan, his weathered face unreadable. "Morning, Miss Anna," he said, tipping his hat. He'd known her since she was a child, but now he couldn't quite meet her eyes. As Samuel lifted her trunk onto the wagon, Anna noticed how many people had found reasons to be on Main Street. The blacksmith paused mid-swing. Young Mrs. Davies stood frozen outside the general store. Even the saloon girls peeked from the dusty windows of the Lucky Dollar. They'd all come to watch her leave. "Right when you get settled," Martha said softly, but they both knew she wouldn't. What was there to say? That the joke had gone as planned? Anna climbed onto the wagon seat beside Pete, her back straight despite the weight of humiliation pressing on her shoulders. As the horses started forward, she heard a boy's voice call out, "Ma, why's Miss Anna leaving?" "Hush now," Mrs. Henderson replied. "She's going where she belongs." Where she belonged. The words followed her like a curse as the wagon rolled past the church where she'd been married and the cemetery where Thomas lay buried. The town shrank behind her, but the shame stayed close, an invisible passenger beside her. "Fine weather for traveling," Pete offered after a while. "Yes," Anna said absently. She barely saw the sky or the wildflowers by the trail. Her mind was already racing ahead, to the man waiting at the end of this road, the one who'd lost everything and didn't yet know a broken woman was being sent his way. The storm Pete predicted came sooner than expected, catching them 10 miles out. By the time they reached the unmarked gate that led to Jack Monroe's ranch, both were soaked to the bone. "This is as far as I go," Pete said, avoiding her eyes. "House is another mile up that path." Anna climbed down, her boots sinking in the mud. "Thank you, Pete." He hesitated. "You sure about this, Miss Anna? I could tell folks you changed your mind. Say you headed east instead." "I have no family in the east," she said simply, gripping her carpet bag. "This is where I'm meant to be." Pete tipped his hat and turned the wagon back toward town. She watched it disappear, then turned toward the narrow, muddy track that wound through the tall grass. The land was wilder here. Lonely and vast, the kind of place where voices carried for miles and still found no answer. By the time she saw the house, dusk was falling. The ranch sat low against the horizon, built of weathered logs gone silver with age. A barn leaned beside it, a few sheds scattered like forgotten thoughts. Smoke curled from the chimney, a thin thread of life in the emptiness. She paused at the porch, aware of her bedraggled state. Mud-stained skirt, hair come loose, pride worn thin. The door opened before she could knock. Jack Monroe filled the doorway, tall and broad-shouldered, with gray eyes like a winter sky. His dark hair brushed his collar, streaked with silver, though he couldn't be more than 35. His face gave nothing away. "You're the woman from town," he said. Not a question. "Anna Whitmore," she managed, lifting her chin. He studied her a moment, then said flatly, "You're late." "Storm?" "Yes. My trunk's at the gate. It was too heavy to carry." Without a word, he strode past her, disappearing down the track. Anna stood dripping on his porch, unsure whether to follow. She didn't. The house behind her looked tired. Curtains missing, garden gone to weeds, silence heavy as the storm itself. When Jack returned, he carried her trunk on one shoulder as if it weighed nothing. He set it down gently on the porch and met her eyes for the first time. "Best get inside." "Storm's not done yet." The house smelled of dust and ashes, a bare kitchen, cold fireplace, and a table set for one. Everything spoke of a man who'd stopped living, just surviving. "Your room's down the hall," he said. "Was my wife's sewing room. Cleared it out yesterday." "Thank you," Anna said softly. "Get some rest." "Tomorrow's soon enough to figure the rest." Then he turned away, his boots echoing down the hallway, leaving her alone in the lamplight. Anna looked around the silent house and thought, so this is where jokes end. But as thunder rolled over the plains, she whispered to herself, "Let it come." She'd survived worse storms than this. Tomorrow, she'd start again. And neither the town nor its laughter would decide her worth ever again. Wait, before we move on, what do you think about the story so far? The next morning broke clear and cold. Sunlight streamed through the windows, touching the dust that hung in the air like memory. Anna woke early, her body stiff from travel and the unfamiliar bed. For a moment, she forgot where she was until she heard the faint creak of floorboards and the sound of boots moving across the porch. Jack Monroe was already at work. Through the small window, she saw him carrying feed buckets toward the barn, his movements sure and practiced. He worked like a man, trying to outrun his thoughts. Anna dressed quickly, choosing her one clean dress, and tied her hair back. She found coffee in a tin by the stove, just as he'd said. It was weak and bitter, but it was something warm. When Jack came in, he nodded toward the pot. "You make that?" "Yes," she said carefully. He poured himself a cup and took a sip. "Better than I expected." "Thank you," Anna replied, unsure whether it was a compliment or surprise. They ate in silence. He ate quickly, efficiently, then pushed his plate away and stood. "I rise at dawn, work till dark, meals on time, laundry Mondays, town trips first Saturday each month. You'll have egg money if the hens start laying again." Anna nodded. Understood. He hesitated, his gaze fixed on her with something unreadable. "You sure you're cut out for this life?" "I've lived harder ones," she answered simply. That seemed to satisfy him. Without another word, he took his hat from the hook and stepped out into the sunlight. The door closed softly behind him. Alone, Anna took stock of her surroundings. The kitchen was functional but joyless. No curtains, no flowers, no warmth. She found a broom in the corner and began to sweep, raising little clouds of dust that shimmered in the light. By the time the noon sun reached the window, the floorboards shone. She scrubbed the table, washed the dishes, and set a small vase, an old jar she'd found, on the windowsill with wildflowers she'd gathered near the creek. When Jack returned for his meal, he paused in the doorway, surprise flickering across his face. Didn't expect this place to look different after one morning. "I don't sit idle," she said. His mouth twitched, almost a smile. Noted. They ate together, quietly. The silence between them wasn't as heavy as before. As days passed, a rhythm formed between them. Jack worked the cattle and mended fences. Anna tended the house and garden, coaxing life from the soil that had long been ignored. The hens began laying again. The room smelled of soap and bread instead of dust. Jack cooking, the careful way she mended torn curtains, the steady determination in her hands. One evening, when she stepped onto the porch to shake out a rug, she found him sitting there, carving something from a piece of wood. The sky was turning purple, the sun sinking behind the plains. "What are you making?" she asked. He turned the small figure in his hand, a half-finished toy horse. "Started it for my boy," he said quietly. "Didn't finish." Quote. Anna sat down a few steps away. What was his name? Timothy. He'd be 8 this winter. She didn't speak. Some things didn't need answers. They sat in silence as night settled, the wind moving through the grass like a whisper. The next morning, the fence around the garden had been fixed. Straight posts, new wire. Jack didn't mention it, and neither did she. But she smiled when she saw it. A week later, she returned the favor by organizing the barn, hanging tools properly, repairing the harness straps he hadn't had time to fix. When he found it, he said nothing, just nodded once. A quiet truce had formed between them, a respect built on work and shared solitude. October brought frost on the grass and smoke from the chimney. The first real cold morning, Jack found her outside, chopping kindling. "You don't have to do that," he said, taking the axe from her. "I can manage," Anna replied. "I know you can," he said softly, setting another log. "Doesn't mean you have to." They worked side by side, breath misting in the cold air. When they were done, he turned to her. "Sarah, my wife, used to plant flowers by the fence. Said beauty mattered as much as bread. I tore them out after she passed." "Maybe it's time to plant new ones," Anna said. "Not for her, for you." Jack looked at her then, really looked. For the first time, his eyes weren't empty. "Maybe," he said quietly. That night, as the wind howled outside, they shared supper by the fire. The silence between them felt different now, warmer, gentler. When a storm hit a week later, snow and wind battered the house. The fire burned low. No sense freezing in separate rooms. Jack said gruffly, laying out bedrolls near the hearth. They slept on opposite sides of the fire, but as the storm raged, words began to bridge the distance between them. Jack told her about Missouri, about the dreams he'd buried with his family. Anna spoke of her husband, of the doctor's verdict that had branded her barren. Jack stirred the fire and said softly, "Doesn't make you less of a woman. Sarah lost 2 before Tim. Thought it near broke her. Having children, or not having them, it ain't what makes a person whole." Quote. Anna's breath caught. "Then what does?" He looked at her through the glow of the fire. "Being useful, I reckon. Having work that matters. Maybe someone to share the load." When morning came, the storm had passed, leaving the world white and clean. Jack handed her a cup of coffee, his fingers brushing hers. Neither pulled away. "The fence in the north pasture's down," he said. "We'll fix it together." "We?" she repeated. He nodded once. "We." And just like that, a new word took root between them. Winter came early that year, wrapping the plains in silence and snow. Days bled together, feeding cattle, breaking ice on the troughs, cooking what little they had left. Life on the ranch was hard, but it was theirs. The cold brought a strange closeness between Anna and Jack, something quiet but strong. They still spoke little, yet every shared task, every glance across the table, built a bridge between them. Then came the blizzard. For 3 long days, snow fell in thick waves, cutting them off from the world. On the 3rd night, as wind screamed across the roof, a sharp sound split the storm. 3 gunshots. Jack froze mid-step. "Distress signal," he said, already reaching for his rifle. "Could be travelers," Anna said. "Could be trouble," he replied. "I'm coming with you." "Like hell," he said. "Jack Monroe," she said firmly, meeting his glare. "If they need help, you'll need mine. And if it's danger, you'll need someone watching your back." He hesitated, then nodded once. "Get the shotgun." The storm clawed at them as they pushed into the night. Snow came sideways, the world reduced to white and shadow. They followed the sound until shapes loomed through the blur. 4 horses huddled by the fence, and 4 people barely standing. "Help us," a woman's voice called. Jack lowered his rifle. "Get them inside!" 2 men, 2 women, 1 man barely conscious, his arm hanging useless. Anna helped him while Jack led the others toward the light of the house. Inside, the air turned frantic. She worked quickly, cutting away wet clothes, heating water, splinting the broken arm with strips of barrel wood and torn linen. Jack brought wood and blankets, his movements quiet and sure. By the time the fire roared high, their guests were fed, bandaged, and half asleep. The uninjured man introduced himself as Frank Morrison. His wife, Mary, sat beside him, holding his brother Ben's good hand. The other woman was Catherine, Ben's wife. "We got caught when the storm hit," Frank said. "Left the wagon train 2 days back." "You're safe now," Anna said gently. Mary smiled faintly. "You too saved our lives." Anna glanced at Jack, who was sitting near the fire cleaning his rifle. "We just did what needed doing." When Mary asked, "How long have you two been married?" Jack looked up and said, "Few months." Anna blinked in surprise but said nothing. Later, when the guests were asleep, she asked quietly, "Why did you tell them that?" Jack shrugged. "Didn't seem right explaining whatever this is." She smiled, just a little. "Whatever this is seems to work." Quote, "The next morning, the blizzard calmed, but another storm arrived at sunset. A man on horseback stumbled into their yard, half frozen. He said his name was Cole Anderson, claiming to be looking for the Morrisons. But the way his eyes darted around the room made Anna uneasy. Jack must have felt it too. He kept his rifle close. Cole's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Nice spread you got here. Hard keeping up all this land with just the 2 of you." Jack's tone was even. "We manage." "Big herd," Cole continued, watching him. "Be a shame if something happened to it." Anna moved closer to the table, resting her hand near the shotgun. "My husband's a fine marksman," she said calmly. "One county shoot 3 years running. Dropped a wolf at 300 yards last month. 1 shot." Cole hesitated, uncertainty flickering across his face. "That so?" "Ask anyone in town," Anna said sweetly. The tension hung thick until morning. By dawn, Cole was gone, riding east with the first light. Jack didn't relax until the horizon swallowed him. "He'll be back," he said quietly. But days passed, and the threat never came. The Morrisons stayed until the weather cleared, promising to return the favor someday. As their wagon rolled away, Jack stood beside Anna. "You called me your husband," she said softly. "You called me a marksman," he replied. They shared a look, and something unspoken passed between them. The walls that had kept them apart were crumbling. Months passed. The snow melted. The prairie turned green again. Anna planted flowers along the fence, just as she'd promised. Jack built a swing beneath the old oak. The silence that once filled the house was replaced by small talk, laughter, and the steady rhythm of belonging. Then, one morning, a faint knock sounded at the door. Anna opened it to find a young woman swaying on the porch, a bundle clutched to her chest. "Please," the woman whispered before collapsing. Anna caught her, calling for Jack. When they got her inside, they found the bundle was a baby, a newborn, weak but breathing. The woman's fever burned high. "My name's Rose Sullivan," she gasped. "Came from Kansas, looking for his father." Quote, Jack fetched blankets while Anna cradled the baby. "What's his name?" she asked softly. "William," Rose whispered. "After his daddy." 3 days later, Rose was gone. The fever took her quietly at dawn. They buried her on the hill behind the house, marking her grave with a wooden cross. "What now?" Anna asked, her voice breaking. "What do we do with the child?" Jack's answer was simple. "We raise him." "But—" "No buts," he said firmly. "That boy needs a home. We've got one." They named him William Monroe. The following months transformed the ranch again. Anna learned to care for the baby, his tiny hands curling around her finger. Jack helped at night, pacing the floor when William cried. He built a cradle with his own hands and filled the house with quiet laughter again. When spring came, they took William to town to finalize option papers. The judge smiled as he signed. "You two make a fine family." But Cedar Ridge talked. "How convenient," some whispered. "The barren woman suddenly has a baby." Anna ignored them, holding her son close. But when Mrs. Henderson cornered her outside the mercantile, demanding to know where the child came from, Jack appeared. "He came from heaven," he said calmly, "and he's ours." From then on, no one dared ask again. Years later, folks would still talk about the woman they'd sent away as a